The rain fell hard against the stone walls of Windsor Castle. Inside, Kate Middleton stood alone in the corridor, her hands shaking. She tried to steady her breathing, but the weight pressing down on her chest was too heavy. Tears began to stream down her face. No cameras, no crowds, just silence. For months, she had carried it all. The pressure, the scrutiny, the whispers. She had smiled through every public appearance, waved to every crowd, spoken every scripted line. But tonight, something inside her had broken. She pressed her back against the cold wall and covered her face with her hands. She didn't want anyone to see her like this. Not the staff. Not William. Not anyone. But someone did see her. A figure appeared at the end of the hallway, tall, silent, dressed in the red tunic and black bearskin. Cap of the Queen's Guard. He stood perfectly still, as he had been trained to do. But his eyes were locked on Kate. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, something unexpected happened. The guard stepped forward. It was against protocol. Against every rule drilled into him since the day he took the oath. Royal guards do not speak. They do not move unless ordered. They do not interfere. But he did. He walked slowly toward her, his boots echoing in the empty hall. Kate looked up, startled. Her tears were still wet on her cheeks. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what he would do. The guard stopped a few feet away. He stood at attention, but his voice was soft. Gentle, Your Royal Highness, he said quietly. You don't have to carry it alone. Kate froze. She stared at him, her breath caught in her throat. No one had said anything like that to her in a long time. Not in that way. Not with that tone. Before you hear what happens next. If you love real stories that touch the heart, hit that subscribe button and stay with us. You won't want to miss this. Kate wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. I'm fine, she whispered. I just needed a moment. The guard didn't move. He didn't look away. With respect, ma'am, he said, you don't look fine. She let out a shaky breath. She wanted to argue, to say she was strong, that she could handle it. But the words wouldn't come. I see you, the guard continued. Every time you walk past, every time you smile for the cameras, I see the weight you carry. Kate's lip trembled. She had spent so long pretending that no one noticed, that no one cared. But he had noticed. Why are you telling me this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The guard hesitated. Then he spoke words that would stay with her forever. 'Cause sometimes, he said, the people who protect you need to remind you you're still human. Kate felt her knees weaken. She had never heard anyone in the palace speak to her like that. Not with such honesty, such warmth. But before she could respond, footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall. Someone was coming. Asterisk, the footsteps grew louder. Kate's heart pounded in her chest. She quickly wiped her face, trying to erase any trace of tears. The guard stepped back into position, his face blank, his body rigid. It was as if the moment between them had never happened. Prince William appeared around the corner. His expression was tight, his jaw clenched. He had been in meetings all evening, dealing with matters he couldn't discuss. But the moment he saw Kate, his face softened. Kate, he said, walking toward her. What are you doing out here? She forced a smile. The same smile she had perfected over the years. Just needed some air, she said lightly. It was getting stuffy inside. William studied her face. He knew her too well. He could see the redness in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. But he didn't push. Not here. Not now. Come on, he said gently, taking her hand. Let's go back. Kate glanced at the guard one last time. He stood perfectly still, staring straight ahead. But for just a second, their eyes met. And in that second, she saw something she hadn't expected. Understanding, William led her down the hallway, his hand warm around hers. But Kate's mind was still on the guard, on his words, on the way he had seen through the armor she wore every day. Later that night, Kate sat by the window in their private quarters. William was on the phone in the next room, his voice low and serious. She stared out at the dark grounds, the rain still tapping against the glass. She couldn't stop thinking about what the guard had said. You're still human. It seemed so simple, but it was the one thing no one ever acknowledged. She was expected to be perfect, flawless, unshakable, but she wasn't. She was just a woman trying to survive in a world that demanded everything from her. William returned, loosening his tie. He sat down beside her and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. You okay? He asked softly. Kate nodded, but she didn't speak. Kate, William said, his voice firmer now. Talk to me. She turned to look at him. His eyes were filled with concern, with love, but also with exhaustion. He was carrying his own weight, his own burdens. I'm just tired, she said quietly. That's all, William sighed. He pulled her closer, resting his chin on top of her head. I know, he whispered. I know. They sat in silence for a long time. The rain continued to fall. The world outside felt distant and cold, but inside, something had shifted. The next morning, Kate returned to her duties. She smiled for the cameras. She shook hands. She delivered her lines with grace and poise. But something was different. She felt lighter as she walked through the palace courtyard. Surrounded by staff and security, she saw him again. The guard. He stood at his post near the gate, his face expressionless, his posture perfect. Kate slowed her pace. She glanced at him as she passed, and for just a moment she smiled. Not the royal smile, not the practiced one. A real smile. The guard didn't move, but his eyes followed her. And in that brief glance, she knew he understood. But what Kate didn't know was that someone else had been watching that night. Someone who had seen the guard step forward. Someone who now had questions, 2 days later. The guard was summoned to the office of the captain of the guard. His name was Officer James Calloway. Though no one in the palace knew much about him, beyond his record, decorated, disciplined, silent, he stood at attention in front of the captain's desk. The captain, a stern man in his 60s, with silver hair and a sharp gaze, studied him carefully. Calloway, the captain said slowly. Do you know why you're here? No, sir, James replied. The captain leaned back in his chair. You were seen speaking to the Princess of Wales 2 nights ago. In the East Corridor, alone. James didn't flinch. Yes, sir. Care to explain? James hesitated. He knew the rules. He had broken them, but he didn't regret it. She was distressed, sir, he said carefully. I felt it was my duty to offer reassurance. The captain's eyes narrowed. Your duty is to stand guard, not to engage with members of the royal family? Yes, sir. Why did you? James met the captain's gaze. Because she needed someone to see her, sir. Not as a princess. As a person. The room fell silent. The captain studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed and shook his head. You're walking a dangerous line, Calloway, he said quietly. This family is under constant scrutiny. Every word. Every action. If someone had seen you, if the press had gotten wind of it, it would have been a scandal. I understand, sir. Do you? The captain leaned forward. Because if you do, you'll make sure it never happens again. Yes, sir. But deep down, he wasn't sure if he could keep that promise. Meanwhile, Kate's days continued as they always did. Meetings, events, photographs. But something had changed inside her. She felt a small spark of strength she hadn't felt in months. She found herself looking for him. The guard. James. She didn't know his name yet, but she remembered his face, his voice, his words. One afternoon, as she left a charity event, she spotted him standing near the palace entrance. She slowed her steps, pretending to adjust her coat. Her security team moved around her, but she waved them off. I'm fine, she said with a polite smile. Just need a moment. She walked toward the entrance, her heels clicking softly on the stone path. As she passed James, she spoke without looking at him. Thank you, she said quietly. For the other night, James didn't move, but his voice was low and steady. "You don't need to thank me, ma'am." Kate paused. "Yes, I do." She walked on, disappearing into the palace. James stood perfectly still, his heart pounding in his chest. He had spent years learning to stay invisible, to be silent, to never let emotion show. But in that moment, he realized something. He had been seen to. That evening, William noticed the change in Kate. She seemed calmer, more present. He didn't know what had caused it, but he was grateful. "You seem better," he said as they sat down for dinner. Kate smiled. "I am." What changed? She thought about the guard. About his words? About the way he had reminded her of something she had forgotten. "I just remembered something," she said softly. "That I'm allowed to be human." William reached across the table and took her hand. "You are," he said firmly. "You always have been." But Kate knew it wasn't that simple. The world didn't see her that way. The press didn't. The public didn't. But one person had. And that was enough. The weeks passed, and the palace returned to its usual rhythm. Kate attended engagements, delivered speeches, and appeared in countless photographs. But she carried something with her now, a quiet strength. A small flame that refused to go out. She didn't see James often. He was rotated between posts, as all guards were. But every time she did see him, there was a silent acknowledgement between them. A glance. A nod. Nothing more. It was enough. But others were beginning to notice. One evening, as Kate walked through the palace gardens, she overheard two members of the household staff talking in low voices. "Did you see the way she looked at that guard?" One of them whispered. "Which one?" the other asked. "Away. The one by the east gate? I swear there's something going on." Kate froze behind a hedge, her heart pounding. She knew how quickly rumors spread in the palace, how a single word, a single look, could spiral into something dangerous. She took a breath and kept walking, her head held high. She wouldn't let gossip dictate her actions. She had done nothing wrong, but she also knew she had to be careful. That night, William received a call from one of his private secretaries. He stepped out of the room to take it, and when he returned, his face was tense. "Is everything all right?" Kate asked. William hesitated. "There's been some talk," he said carefully. "About you and one of the guards." Kate's stomach dropped. "What kind of talk?" "Nothing serious," William said quickly. "Just palace gossip. But we need to be mindful." Kate felt a surge of frustration. "I haven't done anything," she said firmly. "I spoke to him once. That's all." "I know," William said, sitting beside her. "But you know how it is. People watch everything we do. They twist things." Kate looked down at her hands. She knew he was right, but it didn't make it any easier. "He helped me," she said quietly, "when I was falling apart. He reminded me that I'm human." William softened. He reached for her hand. "I'm glad he did," he said gently. "But we have to protect you. Protect us." Kate nodded. She understood. But it didn't stop the ache in her chest. The next day, James was called into the captain's office again. This time, the tone was colder. "Calloway," the captain said sharply, "there are rumors circulating about you and the Princess of Wales." James stood rigid. "Sir, I don't want to hear it," the captain cut him off. "I warned you, and now it's become a problem." James clenched his jaw. "Nothing inappropriate has happened, sir. I don't care," the captain snapped. "Perception is everything in this place. And right now, the perception is that you overstepped." James said nothing. The captain leaned forward. "You're being reassigned. Effective immediately. You'll no longer serve within the palace grounds." James felt the words hit him like a blow. "Sir, it's not a request, Calloway. It's an order." James swallowed hard. He had known this might happen. But it didn't make it any easier. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. He was dismissed as he walked out of the office. He felt the weight of everything crashing down on him. He had spent years serving the crown, years dedicating his life to duty, and now, because of one moment of compassion, it was all being taken away. But even so, he didn't regret it. The next morning, Kate walked through the palace grounds, preparing for another engagement. She glanced toward the east gate, expecting to see James standing there, but whilst another guard stood in his place. A stranger. Kate's chest tightened. She stopped walking, her eyes scanning the grounds. But James was nowhere to be seen. She turned to one of her aides. "The guard who was usually posted by the east gate," she said carefully. "Where is he?" The aide hesitated. "I believe he was reassigned, ma'am." Kate's heart sank. She knew what that meant. Kate tried to push the thought from her mind, but it stayed with her all day. Through every meeting, every handshake, every polite smile, she kept thinking about James, about the fact that he had been removed because of her. That evening, she sat alone in her study, staring at the rain streaking down the window. William was away on a trip, and the palace felt emptier than usual. She thought about the night in the corridor, the way James had stepped forward when no one else had, the way he had spoken to her like she was a person, not a title, and now he was gone. She felt a surge of guilt. He had been punished for showing kindness, for being human in a place that demanded perfection. She couldn't let it end like this. Kate stood and walked to her desk. She picked up her phone and called her private secretary. "I need you to find someone for me," she said quietly. "Officer James Calloway. I need to know where he's been reassigned." There was a pause on the other end. "Ma'am, are you sure?" "Yes," Kate said firmly. "I'm sure." 2 days later, Kate received the information. James had been reassigned to a post outside London, a quieter station, away from the palace. Away from her, she sat with the information for hours, turning it over in her mind. She knew she couldn't reach out to him directly. It would cause too much noise, too many questions, but she could do something else. She wrote a letter. It was short, simple, written in her own hand. "Dear Officer Calloway, I wanted you to know that what you did for me that night mattered. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that I'm allowed to be human, that I don't have to carry everything alone. I'm sorry that your kindness cost you something. That's not fair. But I hope you know that it made a difference. To me, thank you, Kay." She sealed the letter in an unmarked envelope and gave it to someone she trusted, someone who could deliver it quietly, without drawing attention, and then she waited. 3 days later, James sat in his small quarters at the new post. It was quieter here, lonelier. He missed the palace, though he'd never admit it. He missed the sense of purpose. A knock came at the door. He opened it to find a courier holding an envelope. No return address. No insignia. James took it, confused. He closed the door and opened the envelope carefully. When he read the letter, his breath caught. He read it again, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. She had remembered him. She had cared enough to reach out even when she didn't have to. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket, close to his heart. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Kate felt a small sense of peace. She didn't know if James had received the letter. She didn't know if it would make a difference. But she had done what she could, and that was enough. William returned home that evening. He found Kate sitting by the window, looking calmer than she had in weeks. "You seem lighter," he said, sitting beside her. Kate smiled. "I think I am." William studied her for a moment. "What changed?" Kate thought about the letter, about James, about the quiet act of kindness that had saved her in a dark moment. "I just realized something," she said softly, "that even small acts of compassion can change everything." William nodded. He didn't fully understand, but he didn't need to. He was just glad she was okay. Months passed. The seasons changed. Kate's life continued at its relentless pace. Royal tours, charity work, public appearances. But something inside her had shifted permanently. She carried herself differently now, with more grace, more strength. She thought about James often, though she never spoke his name aloud. She wondered if he had kept the letter, if it had meant anything to him. She hoped it had. One crisp autumn afternoon, Kate attended a veterans event in central London. It was a smaller gathering, more intimate than the grand ceremonies she was used to. She walked through the crowd, shaking hands, listening to stories, And then she saw him. James stood near the back of the room, dressed in civilian clothes. He looked older somehow, quieter, but his eyes were the same. Kate's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to see him here. She wasn't even sure if he'd recognize her in this context, but he did. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Kate excused herself from the conversation she was in and made her way toward him. Her security team followed at a respectful distance, but she waved them back. "Officer Calloway," she said softly as she reached him. James straightened. "Your Royal Highness." Kate smiled. "You don't have to be so formal." James hesitated, then allowed a small smile. Old habits. They stood in silence for a moment, the noise of the event swirling around them. "I got your letter," James said quietly. Kate's breath caught. "You did?" "I did." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It meant more to me than you know." Kate felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I'm glad," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know what you did that night. It saved me." James looked at her, his expression serious. "You saved yourself, ma'am. I just reminded you that you could." Kate felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to say more, to thank him properly, but the words felt too big for this moment. "What are you doing now?" she asked instead. "I left the Guard," James said simply. "I'm working with a veterans charity now, helping others transition." Kate's heart swelled. "That's wonderful."
Ow.
James nodded. "It feels right." They stood together for another moment. Two people who had briefly crossed paths in the most unexpected way. Two people who had reminded each other what it meant to be human. "I should let you go," James said gently. "People are watching." Kate glanced around. He was right. Eyes were starting to turn toward them, curious, questioning. "Take care of yourself," Kate said softly. "You too, my Am." Kate turned and walked back toward the crowd. But before she did, she looked back one last time. James was watching her, and he was smiling. Later that evening, Kate returned to Palace.